Chris Charbonneau. I am the Director of Advocacy and Engagement for My Future NC. We are lifting up North Carolina's first in FAFSA initiative, in which we have brought partners all across the state to assist us in developing a tracker, as well as the NC First in FAFSA Challenge. Many of you have been great participants and certainly very engaged in the work. We appreciate everything that you're doing for students and families. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Before pulling up the slides, I'm going to go ahead and have folks on the call from the collaborative really go around and just introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Melissa.
Great, thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Caperton. I'm the Director of Regional Impact at My Future NC. It's good to see you all this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Becky.
Hi, Becky Tippett, Director of Carolina Demography at UNC Chapel Hill, and really look forward to this conversation today.
I'm Tom.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Gomes. I'm a master's student at UNCW and a Belk Impact Fellow at Carolina Demography, and I'm happy to be here.
Catherine.
Hello, I'm Catherine Marker. I'm at the State Education Assistance Authority, the state agency that helps North Carolina pay for education, and here because of administering finish the FAFSA project.
Tony.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Tony Blunt. I work for Craven County Schools as the school district coordinator for college advising and scholarships. Good to be with everyone.
Lashika.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lashika Hester. I am Manager of Programs Administration for My Future NC.
And Julia.
Hey everyone, I'm Julia Fisher with My Future NC, coordinating a lot of the behind the scenes for the First in FAFSA initiative, and you may have corresponded with me on email, so hello.
So as you can tell, it takes a village. We've got many more individuals that have been supportive in this work and really helping us to just understand in our first year how we might shape the tracker, what things we look forward to, and things that we should consider in that next year. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen. Can everybody see this? Excellent. So today's CIHS office hours, we wanted to spend the opportunity to just unpack many of the different questions, why the tracker exists, just some baseline information and understanding, so that two, when we get to really understanding some of the further challenges that you might be having, areas of opportunity, the ways in which you've been using it, as well as an opportunity to learn from you as to how we might consider what additional types of things can we improve upon, can we consider in the next year, and then certainly as we begin to also think through the very specific nature of our cooperative innovative high schools. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to use a panel kind of discussion in order to enable some of the additional information to help us in understanding the tracker. So my first question for the panel, and this is really directed to the individuals that introduced themselves on the call, is what is the goal of the tracker and the challenge? So Melissa, I'm going to look to you.
Sure. Well, I think, as educators, we all recognize that FAFSA is a really critical step in our students' college-going journey. Students who complete the FAFSA are more likely to enroll and succeed in college. And so recognizing that there's opportunities for us to grow even pre-pandemic in terms of engaging more students with the FAFSA completion process. And certainly in the middle of the pandemic, recognizing that we've seen some decreases in FAFSA completions across the state, and particularly in communities that are serving low-income students and high populations of students of color. We really wanted the tracker to serve as a resource to help build awareness around FAFSA and FAFSA completion, to lift up and celebrate the good work that's happening at the local level, and to sort of create excitement, as much excitement as you can create around a federal financial aid form, around the FAFSA process, in the hopes that we are encouraging more students to complete this with support from their trusted counselors and college access professionals at their school. This is also a way we hope to sort of automate data that are publicly available from U.S. Department of Education and DPI, sort of a one place where our school and district folks can come to receive timely information on FAFSA completions at the school, district, and county levels. And then the challenge really is to to help incentivize that FAFSA completion support at the local level. Through the challenge, we aim to lift up and recognize both FAFSA completion growth, as well as innovative practices. And as we get toward the end of today's discussion, we'll be sure to give you updates on that. But again, schools who are registered are eligible for $500 First in FAFSA grants as sort of a recognition, and hats off to the good work that's happening at the local level.
Thank you, Melissa. As many of you have already gone out to see the tracker on ncfirstinfafsa.com, or there's also a direct link that's located right here. We, in the process of developing the tracker, came up with some frequently asked questions. We are continuing to add to those questions as questions come into the First in FAFSA email. Julia has been going down and making sure that she is coordinating across all of our teams to ensure that we put out the latest and greatest. I'm going to spend this next section talking about data, sources, and some of the limitations that we're experiencing. Becky with Carolina Demography, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to point a few of these questions directly at you. The first one is, what data are you using to determine how many seniors our school has? And what do I do if it's no longer accurate? Can it be updated?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So this has been a real challenge because we recognize that the senior class for high schools is not static, but we need to make a kind of point in time determination for the number of seniors for the purposes of the trackers, so that we can consistently show kind of increases over time based on a stable kind of fixed cohort of seniors. So we looked at other states and how they were evaluating this and kind of drew from them for this first year. And what we chose was we used the month 2 enrollment based on the principal's monthly report from NCDPI. That was pretty consistent with how some other states had done it. What was challenging was obviously in the cooperative innovative high school context, there are both grade 12 and grade 13. And we evaluated a few different options to do that. And consistent with the the FAFSA, we identified grades 12 and 13 as potentially seniors, although we did make some modifications for CIHS that indicated that only grade 13 represented seniors. We did limit the senior definition to be just the grade 13. So we're doing month 2 data from the principal's monthly report from DPI, grade 12 or 13, or just grade 13 only. I also want to note that for the purposes of the grant, we do want to do just this based on graduates. So we're going to move into a more accurate number for how many students actually graduate, because we know that this is, this is our best estimate based on the data that we have available to us.
And so diving a little bit deeper, where does the data for FAFSA completion rate come from, and which students are counted in those FAFSA completion numbers?
Sure, Chris, before we go on, I just saw Nadia had a question, so I'd be happy to answer questions. Nadia, did you want to ask a question? Oh.
All right, we just opened up the ability to unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just like, I hate to jump around if you're going to get to that, but it's challenging for us, like with seniors, your grade 12 and grade 13, because most of our actual grade 12 kids that are completing the FAFSA are going to four-year college, whereas our grade 13 students who you're counting as a senior are the students who are choosing to stay on and complete their 2-year degree and don't always necessarily have the intention of going to 4 years. Some of them do and some of them don't. So you're missing this whole population of our kids that are completing the FAFSA as 12th graders and then graduating versus the kids that are staying on for year 13 if you're counting them as our seniors.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing that. I do want to emphasize that we are including grade 12 and 13 as seniors. So they both are included.
Okay.
We did have some schools say grade 13 only because they said grade 12 was not graduating.
Okay, because that's, I feel like where we're obviously trying to explain the importance to it of kids that are doing grade 13. But like current 12th graders who plan to do grade 13 aren't wanting to do it. And then they're waiting to do it. And then, so we're trying to show that we're putting in the effort. And we feel like our kids that, I don't know if other early colleges are experiencing this, but our kids are completing the FAFSA and then it's not showing that they're doing it because of where they are in the process. So like I have, I look at my report and then I look at it on the tracker and those two things don't match, I
would say the same is true in Buncombe County. I'm Suzanne Gavanis and I work at the district office here in a similar role as Tony. But they get very upset when I show our county reports because it's not accurate for their 12 and 13. I'm curious, how long have you been including both 12 and 13?
This is our first year doing it, so only a few months now.
They are seeing that it's very skewed and not accurate.
As in an under
yes, ma'am, as in being underreported for their 12 and 13th grades.
So this goes to the question that Chris was just asking, and I think highlights a real challenge in what we have available and the unique population that may become in a cooperative innovative high school. And that is that the data that we have access to what's aggregate data from federal student aid. And they are using this algorithm to identify who is a senior. And there's certain students who are not identified as a senior. And so students who I think are over age 19, Catherine, it's over age 19, who report that they are not a first-in-time college student, which may be a number of cooperative innovative students because they're reporting that they've experienced some college before, and who have completed the FAFSA before are not flagged as high school seniors. And so because of that, they're not reported by federal student aid. And that actually may be a case in which Finish the FAFSA is a much better tool for understanding the completion rates that are going on in the district. But that's a tool that only the individual school counselors have access to. So I can't see, Catherine and I even can't see inside that tool. So there's not a great, it's very this is a challenge that we've been trying to figure out how best to resolve.
The Finish the FAFSA has always had its inherent flaws as well with managing the data. But because it looks at 12th grade, and if you're listing them as 13th grade, it doesn't pick them, or didn't used to pick them up as well. My question with this algorithm, it would be helpful if you could communicate that in writing to us, so then maybe the counselors could prompt the students about how they need to be answering that or reporting more accurately. That would be helpful to have that, what you know of the algorithm. So we could pass that along to our counselors.
Yeah, and the other challenge we've seen is it appears that in some cooperative innovative schools that students are listing the community college that they're at potentially more frequently than they're listing the school itself. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely seeing some things that are suggestive of that. But again, the unfortunate thing here is that we're in a bit of what we would call a black box of data. We can see things that are suggestive of general trends, and we can definitely try to figure out a good way to highlight potential issues so that you can share out with your students of how to possibly avoid them.
Yeah, that would be great if we had some of that.
Hi, my name is Jackie Harris. I'm also an early college principal. My issue ran into the fact that we have 12th graders who are seniors and we have 12th graders that are graduating seniors. So there's a definition of two being, although they're classified as seniors, they're not graduating seniors because they're choosing to stay for the 13th year. So that's where we found our flaw in the data as far as who has completed and who has not. Our non-graduating seniors typically don't do it until grade 13. So that's where we found our flaw at.
Yeah, and this, Chris, would this be a good time to turn it over to Tony? So we've had a lot of discussion about what is a potential solution for this, and Tony's proposed something that we think might have some legs. So.
Yeah, Chris, I was getting excited about this conversation because eventually within the next few minutes, we were going to get into this a little bit deeper. You want to go on and advance through the slides, Chris, and then we'll get to me in just a moment?
Yeah, that would be great. I think that, there are a lot of questions that are surrounding some of the limitations, just better understanding the data, the source of data that it came from. I think maybe if I can just set a baseline of understanding, and then we can kind of go through each of those topics of questions. Tony has been an advisor on our tracker group, helping us to kind of understand where there might be some limitations that you all might see, but then also helping to propose different strategies and supports as we begin to think through what that next step might be. Becky, some of the questions that Suzanne began to ask too was, is there a reason why my school isn't showing up on the tracker? Just to make sure that everybody heard and understood that, could you just lift that up one more time?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons that schools might not be showing on the tracker. One would be a potential name mismatch between how they're being reported in federal student aid and the DPI name. And so if you ever think that your school should be getting reported and you're not seeing it, please let us know, because we have a good solid list of, I'd say 12 to 20 schools right now that we have to make a manual correction or identify, a rename. So that's important for us, and can also identify potential issues where students are misreporting their high school so that you can then work on the ground to correct that. So that's a kind of straightforward but confusing reason. But the other reason could be that maybe there are students that have completed, but at least one student has completed the FAFSA, but not 5 or more, in which case we don't have a concrete number. We just get a number called less than 5. And so we can't calculate a completion rate, and we aren't able to report. We don't put the school on the tracker until there's actually a completion rate that can be calculated. Similarly, one of the reasons could be that a bit of it, there might be this window where we can't identify the school. So maybe students are reporting, but they're reporting a name that's so different that we're not able to kind of say, yes, this appears to be the school that it is. So we're not able to then identify and track it over. So there's a case, for example, where I said there's a local school. We think they're reporting as the community college instead, but that community college has also had reports in prior years. So we can't just say, okay, we're going to assume then that this is the school's data. So that's kind of the reasons why that might be. If you ever think that you should be on the tracker and aren't seeing yourself, definitely reach out, because we'll say the names change sometimes week to week from federal student aid, which can make our matching algorithm on the back end need a little more refinement.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as I said, we're on the tracker. It's just it's much lower than the counselor's data on who has completed. So
yeah, thank you, Suzanne. And I think one of the things is we'll kind of wrap up a couple more of these questions, and then Catherine, we'll shift to you to kind of talk about the differences between the tracker as well as Finish the FAFSA. But Sue made an interesting point where she kind of used the chat to talk about how she has advised her advised students to choose first-year student attended in college before. And I just want to make sure that we're lifting up when a student does do that, how does that track on our tracker?
So My understanding, based on how federal student aid reports its data, is that if a student reports any prior college attendance, that they are not identified as a high school senior. So those students would not be classified as a high school senior, which means that they will not be then reported as completers or submitted forms for the school, for your school in the federal student aid reports.
Thank you. And then the last question, Becky, in your section is, how can I find out what my school's FAFSA completion rate was last year?
Yeah, so we do have information. I think there's an Excel file that we made for download that has that's on the FAQ page. And if you're having trouble navigating that or just need to figure it out, I think the info email, we can definitely get that squared away for you and figure out what that is. And in the future years, we do plan to have historic data on there, but because we're coming off of COVID, we wanted to make this kind of a benchmarking year.
Before you move on, I just want to make sure I got that. So students should, it's advised if they want to be counted that they would list as first year student, but that doesn't affect, because sometimes they're advised for their applications to be a transfer student, but those are two separate issues, right? The FAFSA being a first year student and then their admissions, they're going in as transfer.
So
Tony's not, okay.
Yeah, I can't speak. I have never filled out a FAFSA, so I can't speak to the specifics of the form. And Catherine, I don't know, is there a spot on it where you say, yes, I've attended college before?
Tony, were you gonna?
Yes, there are many questions about the high school that you attend, what your grade level will be next school year, and that would indicate that that information that is then going to your college financial aid offices would then help disseminate that money. So your grant money would be affected by that. If you needed to take out a college loan, that amount, your college loan amount is different, whether you're a first, second, third, or fourth year college student. So yeah, that information is really critical for the student to answer as accurately as possible for financial reasons as well as reporting reasons.
I think we as a group have been reluctant to advise a student to fill out a FAFSA a certain way with the goal of making this reporting work, which isn't necessarily the student's benefit. You know, the reporting is really important, but we want the student to be at the forefront. So I think that has been some of the prudent, sort of cautious note we've had about how do we advise students to fill out that particular question.
So, and with that, I'm going to kind of transition to you, Catherine, a little bit. Just kind of talk about the First and FAFSA tracker, and then I'll have a couple of questions on the back end.
So you want me to go, want me to launch ahead? Because I like your graphic here. I think it's helpful. So what you're looking at is the FAFSA completion rate as the FAFSA tracker that we've just looked at. We'll calculate it, and you need the number of seniors total, and you need the number of seniors completing the FAFSA. What you will find is that Finish the FAFSA, which is your password protected counselor accessed report, has to do the same kind of thing. They have to have seniors, and they have to know which of those seniors are completing the FAFSA. But those two data sources are different. So Becky talked at the beginning about getting the total number of seniors from the month two principals report. Well, for Finish the FAFSA in the CFNC password protected report, that information comes straight from DPI. So it's a list of seniors, not a number of seniors, but an actual list of seniors. So and the reason for that is because the purpose of Finish the FAFSA, well, first of all, it's password protected. So it's not, there's no risk at sharing the names. You couldn't obviously do that widely with the publicly available tracker. And CFNC's Finish the FAFSA report is designed to help counselors help their students. It's not designed to create a rate or to allow schools to compare themselves. It's just simply, we want to know all of our seniors, and we want to know of those seniors, which ones have completed the FAFSA. So the seniors come from a slightly different place. Obviously, it's all DPI, but we have a list of seniors that we offer to schools. Well, then the seniors who start or complete the FAFSA, they're coming in from the actual FAFSA filer data. So I'm at the state agency. We do the state's need-based aid. We're in charge of the FAFSA, the application for the UNC system grant, the community college, the private scholarships. The FAFSA is the application. So we're in charge of that. So we get that information. So we have the actual FAFSA filer information coming in, and we use a name match feature. It's over there on the top right there. So it's fuzzy, what they call a fuzzy match. So we have the list of seniors for the school from DPI. We have the FAFSA filer data, and we match first name, last name, birth date. So there are a couple of things that can go wrong in that fuzzy match, which we can talk about because there's more than one thing. Unfortunately, when you're not using a social security number, you're using first name, last name, date of birth, and we're matching them up. So the senior definition or data pool, data source is different, and then the actual completion is different. Now it should be the same. It should be really, really close. But if it's not identically the same, then you want to understand that the counts are coming from different places. So I'm kind of looking at the right-hand column over here because Becky talked about the first in FAFSA on the left column. So it's my understanding that all 12th and 13th grade students are included. You know, I don't dip in and get to go look at them myself because it's very highly safeguarded. You know, there's just a lot of privacy rules around it. But all 12th and grade students, because again, not trying to produce a rate, not trying to compare schools one against the other. We're just trying to get all the names of any kids who might be working on their FAFSA and needing support. And so the 12th and 13th graders are out there matched up with FAFSA filer data, and the information is there, not for a rate, but just to help the students. Because I'm sure you know that the counselors can go in and say, oh, hey, student, looks like you or your parent haven't actually signed off on the FAFSA. Some of those other things that can keep it from being complete. So that's something that you want to use Finish the FAFSA for. And I would point out too that there's a download to Excel option, which a couple of times in talking about these challenges said, you know, hey, you can calculate your own rate. You can download your Finish the FAFSA to Excel to, you know, take out, say, the 13th graders that shouldn't be counted in there, so that you could know I have these seniors, these completions, and these graduating seniors, these completions, and here's my rate. Keeping in mind that if you download, you're responsible for that data. It can't be sent anywhere. It can't be shared with those kids' names on it, just because there's all that privacy in there that the district agrees to when it signs on to Finish the FAFSA. The last item there, Chris, is just about the updating, because not only are data sources parallel, but not exactly the same. The Finish the FAFSA updates every business day, whereas the federal data, which is feeding into the first in FAFSA data, that is updated weekly. So there's a time lag. But I will stop because I could go more into detail, but don't want to, you know, belabor the details when we don't need to. But let me know. I didn't check the chat, so if you have questions you want to throw my way, that's great, or I'll wait and come back later if helpful.
Catherine, I appreciate that. And I think you answered the question proactively of why is it that the data for my school in regards to the number of students and the number of FAFSA submitted and completed doesn't match what I see on my school's Finish the FAFSA report. You just talked about a wide variety of reasons, from everything from a time lag in the data, and then specifically even the differences that you and Becky had also articulated earlier. I can't see the chat line, but is there anybody else that had any specific questions about Finish the FAFSA before we move on?
I see there was a question in there about how, you know, kind of what I was saying there at the end, that, you know, based on the data issues that you all specifically are facing, would it be our recommendation that you use Finish the FAFSA instead, which Finish the FAFSA is really targeted to helping specific students. So by all means, you want to use it to help those, because that's the real goal, is to help the kids finish the FAFSA. So, you know, the rate is important, but really secondary to the actual kids. But I would argue that with your access, your counselor access, And again, that's limited to people who are actually working one-on-one with the kids, the seniors themselves. So it can't be someone too far removed from the actual work with the students, but that person can calculate a rate. Again, you got to be careful about sharing the spreadsheet, because that becomes, a PII that is governed by the data share agreement that the district signs with us. And we sign one with the federal government and don't want to be caught on the wrong side of that. So, but you can download to Excel and in that way, maybe calculate a rate for your school yourselves to give to your leadership, or metric to provide for yourselves.
Thank you. And Suzanne, you mentioned as well, with all these variable ways to report it and ways to count students, there doesn't seem to be an ideal way to capture information for CIHS and then the early middle college students. We feel you. And I guess that's like the biggest thing that we are all walking away with this, is there are just certainly some of those challenges. And opportunities for us to also look at things a little bit differently, which is why we have advisors like Tony helping us to shape our perspective and view of that. So Tony, do you mind if I go ahead and go to you and talk about your specific experiences as well that may be helpful for others?
Sure, and thank you, Chris. The comments that have been in the chat from Suzanne and Amy, and also the comments that Catherine just made, open up this next part of our discussion so nicely, because I wanted to kind of break this down into some district level uses of and the benefits of this, some school and counselor level uses, and then some student level uses, which have been just touched on briefly. So Catherine mentioned, tracking some information from the district level, and certainly I have used the FAFSA tracker this year over the last several months, and been tracking our school's progress with FAFSA completion. And we are a data-driven district, so it's been a blessing to have that data so easily accessible. Also, what has been mentioned, and Debbie Sabin, who is on the call with us today, is from one of our early college high schools here in Craven County. She's been willing to champion this with me, and we've really dug really deep into how we can help provide the most accurate data for her students and for she and I, so that we can use this to build student presentations, to connect with our community college and use the financial aid experts there to help us in reaching our students right now through either WebEx conversations or through Zoom conversations. So, and she's helped me take a really deeper look into PowerSchool and how we could perhaps get our DPI partners on board for helping us to come up with a future suggestion on determining our graduates. So this data has helped our district level in looking at some of these big issues in what we call career and college ready goal teams. And then our high schools have individual career and college ready goal teams. And part of their goal team work is to increase the FAFSA completion. What this tracker has done for us in terms of opening up that FAFSA conversation has also opened up conversation with individual students on completing RDS, residency determination. And what have you done with your college applications or your conversations with workforce credentials, with military? It's really opened up some wonderful conversations to help students with their post-secondary planning. What we've also shared, and Debbie could comment on this from the school counselor level, is that it's really nice to use that Finish the FAFSA report to be able to determine if there are errors, such as maybe the social security numbers don't match, or the parent didn't sign, or the student didn't sign, and let that conversation, that one-on-one conversation with the student, lead into, number one, a finished FAFSA so that they can submit that to their colleges, but also, what are your plans from here? How can I help and support you through the rest of the processes that may or may not be done? Because we do know that if the FAFSA is not completed, perhaps there are some other steps in this whole process that the student has just has missed. Timelines are just not completed altogether. So it opens up that whole brand new conversation. What it's also done is allow students, allow the counselors to use all the tools on the tracker and identify some like schools, and in their own networking circles, reach out to those counselors at those schools to find out what some of their best practices have been in completing the FAFSA, and then following through with those practices. And then in terms of the student level, I love the way Catherine put that. You know, it's, and Debbie and I have done this together. We look at the FAFSA tracker and we know that for our 2 early college high schools, it is not accurate because we have 12th and 13th graders that will graduate, but there are more 12th graders that will not graduate than will. So that makes the FAFSA completion, the percentage much less in our early college than our traditional high schools, that when we look at the district part of the FAFSA tracker, it makes it look like they're not completing the FAFSA. But then when we take the Finish the FAFSA report, we can recalculate that percent. So when I have to add that to district level data, I can get a much more accurate look at our early college data through Finish the FAFSA right now. And then our traditional high schools, of course, I can use the tracker. So those are just some real things that I've been doing and working with our district level and with our individual counselors, and then turning those counselor sessions and this data session into real live sessions with students to get them completing, doing the work of completing the FAFSA.
Thank you, Tony. I went ahead and as we kind of transition, really building out an opportunity for all of you to share. Yes, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of work. So I have put in the link a Jamboard. Some of you may have used Jamboards before, others of you may not have. This is a great tool that we have found in the Google Suite of applications. And it's a way that if we were all in a room together, we would have a whiteboard or we would have sticky notes, and it would allow us to share some of those practices, some of those ideas, and some of the challenges that you might also be facing that you could help us to consider what things we might be able to consider differently for next year. So I just want to be, oh, sorry about that. It looks like I need to open up access. Let me just change that real quick. Okay, let's do that again. Can everybody get it? Perfect. I see everybody coming into the Jamboard. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So on this left-hand side, you'll see a wide variety of tools. You'll see something that looks like a little bit of a sticky note. If you just click on that, it will come up with a sticky note. You can type your thought or suggestion in, and then you can just hit save and place it onto the Jamboard. I've got a couple of different categories: what's working, what should we consider, and additional ideas. Feel free to post anything that comes to mind. I know that we have heard a couple of things as we kind of worked through our overall office hour that we have taken separate notes on, but if you wouldn't mind adding things here as well.
Chris, I'm view only. I don't know if everybody else is.
Still?
Yes.
Sorry. I have everybody as editor, but let me just copy the link really quick and send it again on the chat.
I can edit, but
you can? Okay,
yeah.
Maybe it's me.
Make sure to refresh your screen.
Where'd it go? Did everybody's just wipe out? Oh, it did. So I'll build out these headings again. I feel like I need some music in the background. It's a little too quiet. That just means you're connecting. Great. So as you all are building out the rest of your Post-its, some things of what's working is making personal connections. Others is using community resources, which we love. Identifying students and families who think they've submitted, but need additional assistance and supports to identify errors. The ability to run reports, schedule individual appointments. Again, all of those personal connections are really great, and building out your partnerships within your community. Some of the things that you guys have asked us to consider is allow us to monitor our FAFSA completion rates and report it. Even some suggestions as to how we might better understand your world, and perhaps the ways in which you are hearing from students. We've heard some folks talk about letting counselors create their roster of potential FAFSA applicants to draw data from, the use of graduation year for a number of graduates. Several of our grade 13 students are finishing their associates in a CTE area and are not going on to college. So again, helping us to better understand the view of which you're working from. And then other ideas is partnering with community college to have them help students complete the FAFSA, sessions for counselors to collaborate to best discuss best practices and implement at their schools, and then work with DPI to use an identifier in PowerSchool as the graduating class size. So really quickly on the partner with community colleges, for those of you that are not aware, we have a drive into your FAFSA drive into your future events. There are completion events that will happen over 3 Saturdays in the month of April. It's also tied to Community College Month. So if you have not yet seen some of that information, we will be sending out that in our Next Step newsletter. We'll also do that as a follow-up. You can see it on the NC First and FAFSA site, where we have got, if you scroll all the way to the bottom to resources and events, you'll see a link there. And Melissa, if you wouldn't mind throwing that in the chat, that would be great. And then one additional one is try to get students who plan to enter military to complete the FAFSA in case they take classes in the future months. That's a really great idea. Tony, I'm not quite sure if you've been talking with others, or the notion about PowerSchool. I'm really glad to see that that has made it onto the Jam board. Would you mind sharing that out? This is something that Tony brought to us a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to take the opportunity to just kind of raise this in this particular setting. We've also had some initial conversations with Isaac Lake just to make sure that he is aware of all the different kinds of conversations and opportunities that this team has brought forward. So Tony?
Sure. So I'll just say that I'm not a PowerSchool expert, but I have enjoyed exploring all of the different data points that we can collect and what we can do with it. And then, of course, working with Debbie again on our call, there is a place under academics where a student grade level can be accurately selected. And so that was just one suggestion that we take to Isaac as a way to collect this information in the most accurate manner from PowerSchool. And of course, when you do anything like this, it has to go through multiple levels of action, including a memorandum of understanding. So we would really love to hear if there is some feedback on that concept of asking a counselor or a data manager, someone in your buildings, who would normally identify what grade level a student is in Power School, if you saw a better selection, or perhaps could comment on legitimately if that could be one of our solutions here.
I see Suzanne like ready to pop.
Well, I agree. That would have to definitely go up the chain and have some MOAs, because that would run into how they figure out cohort graduation rates and how they track classes. And I love the idea of incorporating that. So yes, I mean, I like it. I can just see how it's got to go through several people to be able to. They don't like you getting in there and fooling around with some of that, but I like the idea greatly.
I know I don't have everybody's video up, but in terms of reactions, if you wouldn't mind using the chat and just throwing a big thumbs up emoji or yes, I'm in agreement, that would be really helpful to just kind of gauge if that's something that we should consider and pursue. There is some advocacy work that we'll need to do on that end. And certainly Suzanne and Tony, as you've mentioned, just the memorandum of understanding and what agreements and how does that all work in the greater lens. But that is something we've heard a couple of times now. Debbie, thank you for also mentioning use of projected graduation year on the student academic screen. It's helpful to kind of see your world and where you can see this as an opportunity for us.
And I know in just talking with Debbie throughout the year, the projected graduation year is fluid, right? So some students begin their school year thinking that this is my year, they've got everything completed, and then they have a major hiccup or we have a pandemic and all of a sudden they're not graduating. So we have that data changes for our, not just our early college students, but our traditional high school students as well. But if that number can be fluid with the student situation, then could that still be a possible place to record the projected, to keep a track of how many? Like when I reach out to Debbie and say, okay, so I'm getting ready to pull your finish the FAFSA, what is your graduation class size today? And sometimes she changes that answer 1 month to the next. A student moves, a student didn't complete a course that they needed to, so they need to stick around another semester. And you know, the early grad issue. So I think most of us have had these conversations and unsolved opportunities, I'll put it that way. So yeah, so let me hear about ideas about using perhaps the projected graduation year, and then you updating that as you need to at your school level.
So as you're adding into the chat, and before I have Melissa help to close out for us, one of the things that we have been learning along the way and that we also have been challenged with is right message, right person, right time. Being able to track down everybody's emails and who's the right person has been really challenging for us. We have gone to numerous sources to help us to understand that. In some ways, we've literally gone up to people's websites to be able to pull information over. If anybody can suggest to us if there is a more accurate way to be able to get many of your email addresses, one of the things that we've done with NCDPI is and other kind of cross-sector systems is to have one point of contact within their system office and to be able to send directly, but oftentimes we're trying to get you to subscribe so that we can also send information directly to you so there doesn't a lag of time. Are there any other approaches that we can think of? Just by, if there is anybody that has not yet subscribed to the information that we are sending out, either as My Future NC as a whole or the NC First and FAFSA initiative, I highly encourage you to subscribe. Lashika or Melissa, if you wouldn't mind throwing in the chat the subscribe link. That would be really helpful for us to just make sure that we are getting up-to-date information to you. We are also sending them to your principals as well as your superintendents. Sometimes their information is a little bit higher level, and we've got kind of the more detailed information that's going out to our practitioners that are working directly with our students and families. But helping us to better help you would be a really helpful piece. Melissa, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen again for you to finish this out, and then we'll go to any remaining questions. We are happy to stay if there are others that have questions. Melissa?
Great. Well, thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to join us today and talk with us through data that aren't always perfect. But we are really thrilled that, along with rolling out the tracker and pushing authorized users over to finish the FAFSA through the NC First and FAFSA website, that we were also able to launch an inaugural First and FAFSA challenge, where, as I said earlier, we are going to be recognizing both growth and innovation. For growth, we'll be looking at year-over-year FAFSA completion rates, as well as highest completion rate as of June. As Becky pointed out, we will be using actual graduation numbers in order to determine FAFSA completion rates, and those will be pulled from NCDPI. We can put a couple of links in the chat. The first up there for the challenge grant, thank you. We have the list of schools who have registered for the First and FAFSA challenge at the top of the link there. As I said, those data will be automatically calculated using graduation numbers. And then for the innovation grant, we are asking schools to submit their innovative practices by April 30th. On the next slide, we have sort of the selection criteria that we will be using to identify who receives the First and FAFSA Innovation Grant. We are doing them both statewide. And then I see a couple of familiar names on here for any of you who have high schools that are located in one of the 42 FAFSA priority districts. We also have an innovation grant specific for high schools that are located within those LEAs. I should say one thing I failed to mention for the FAFSA growth challenge. We have divided schools into size and type. So traditional schools will be broken down into sizes that you see on the tracker. CIHS will compete with CIHS, and then we have a separate group for charters. But again, thank you so much for all of the time that you've spent with us this afternoon to share your thoughts and insight around data.
Great, thank you so much. If Wayne Price, you have raised your hand. Let's open up the mic to you.
Thanks. Hi, Chris. I've been listening to all the comments on how the data is put together. And I think there's a area we might be overlooking. And as a first year participant, as in just the first year with a graduating class of more than 5, we were added into the system a little late. And it looked like the county average was placed in as our FAFSA completion score. And that score has not changed since October. We've met with all of our students individually and had them to go into their FAFSA website and actually print out their completion paperwork showing that actually have completed and it's been sent. And it's still showing the same rate. And I'm not able to calculate how our rate came into being based on the number of students we have. So I was wondering if is it possible the fact that we were added late, that there could be some type of way to look at that data in particular and make sure ours is looking correct.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what school are you representing?
This is Washington County Early College High School.
Okay, yeah, and so, okay, we have looked into that. And I think that this, Julie, I know that we corresponded about this. I think this is one of those issues where we're not getting that data reported from federal student aid. We're not seeing those completions on the federal student aid side because for some reason those students are not being identified as seniors on the federal side of it. And so this is where this conversation about, the tracker has a lot of utility, except for where it breaks down for some schools more than others. And in those cases, the FAFSA is going to become a much better, more suitable tool for kind of more complicated graduating student bodies because of the way that federal student aid is identifying seniors.
Okay.
So, and we will keep monitoring that. I'll look into it today and see if there's been any movement on that because we just got a fresh batch of data. So hopefully we'll start to see that be better aligned with what you're actually seeing among your students.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. When we look at our data, there's like over a 50 percentage point difference in what's showing and what we have it actually is. So if we could figure out what was causing that, because it would actually be beneficial. We want the right and accurate data projected for our school, and right now it's hard to support it because it doesn't appear to match up with what we have.
Mr. Price, I think I had the chance to chat with your school counselor, and she was aiming to get access to finish the FAFSA so she could see numbers behind it. Catherine, you were probably getting ready to say this. Has she been able to access it?
Yes, and I have also.
Okay, and are those data accurate and finish the FAFSA? Okay.
Well, there's that at least. And I was going to say that I have heard from counselors over the last year, but even prior to the tracker, who were looking at the federal data just on the federal site. And, things are not right. Maybe they've got a school misrepresented or a school that combined or, whatever. And, it's a challenge to try to reach out to the federal government and say, this isn't quite accurate there. But we've got some determined people here, and Becky's got connections. And I would argue that maybe we'll get better at reaching out to the federal government to say, look, this isn't right for our North Carolina high schools. It's just not easy, but we aren't going to give up, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Catherine, because there's one of the potential action items from this conversation could be for us to more clearly articulate to the federal government where we're seeing some real slippage, because they have revised that high school determination in the past to be more accurate. And I think they have a real opportunity with the growth of cooperative innovative high schools in North Carolina to revisit how they're doing it in the future.
Which would then give you the better data coming in, and
Yeah, thank you for joining us and lifting that up again. I think that everything that we've talked about, from just naming conventions to denominators to time lags to ways that students are reporting, there are a lot of nuances. And some of those nuances are kind of out of our control. But Catherine, to your point of really being able to use this as kind of an advocacy platform for all of us to share in the things that we are experiencing here in North Carolina that perhaps others might be experiencing, but they haven't gone as deeply as to creating their own state trackers. So our hope in coming out of this is to be able to better advocate and lift up. And so it's forums like this that are allowing us to just better understand. So I know that we are coming on time. We will stay on for those of you that need additional questions or assistance. Otherwise, NC First and FAFSA at myfuturenc.org is always a place that you can start. You've met many of the people on the team, and you're welcome to reach out to any of us. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and we appreciate everything that you're